Welcome to the Strategic Veteran, where we chart the course from service to civilian triumph. I'm Adam Peters, a veteran, entrepreneur, and your fellow navigator in the quest for a life of impact and fulfillment. My mission is simple: to empower you with the tools and stories that turn challenge into opportunity. Having walked the path from active duty to where I stand now, I understand the search for purpose that comes with hanging up the uniform. It's a path I've walked, with its trials, its tribulations, and its victories, and it's a journey we're on together. This podcast is more than just conversation. It's a beacon for those seeking to redefine our missions through entrepreneurship. It's about igniting the entrepreneurial spirit that lives within us, the spirit that compels us to create, lead, and make our mark on the world. Here we connect with veterans who have built businesses, sparked change, and found their purpose in the marketplace of ideas. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've transformed their service into startups, their experiences into enterprises, and they're proof that you can too. So whether you're scribbling business plans on napkins or stepping into the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and this is where we unpack the journey of resilience, transition, and growth for our veterans and their loved ones. I'm truly excited for today's episode because we have someone who embodies the essence of transformation, from the battlefield of service to empowering others to navigate life's most challenging transitions with grace. Our guest today, a 24-year veteran of the United States Air Force and Air National Guard, has seen it all, from operating in AWACS surveillance during the Gulf War to working in space operations and managing training across various military branches. Through her remarkable military career, she climbed to the ranks of E7 and GS-11. Now she's taken her experience into an entirely new arena where she helps others redefine success and find alignment in their personal and professional lives. What's more, she's a clinical director, founder of Elysian Dreams LLC, and creator of Deep Space's identity coaching and Elysian Dream U University. With all with one clear mission: to help people align with who they truly are, with the careers and lives that they want to lead. She's also the author of Dream Journey, Breaking the Dream Barriers, a powerful guide encouraging us to bridge the gaps between who we are and what we want to do. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. Our guest has undergone battles, surviving grueling SEER training, confronting burnout in a toxic environment, overcoming the lack of support for trauma recovery, and even facing relational aggression as she transitioned out of service. These challenges, however, only made her stronger, forging a powerful message of perseverance and self-reinvention that she now shares as a life and career coach. Today, we're going to explore Miss Georgia Art's, her unique perspective on resilience, why she chose to let go of seeking validation, and how we too can cultivate the strength to pivot our lives, even in the face of adversity. We'll also explore her thoughts on the often overlooked barriers veterans face when transitioning into civilian careers, and how strategic thinking can lead to meaningful and transformational growth. So if you're wondering how you can turn struggle into strength, or how to align your true identity with your next chapter, this episode's definitely for you. Stay tuned for incredible wisdom and practical tools around reinvention, purpose, and living authentically. Georgia, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Adam, for having me.
Yeah, of course. First question, same question for everybody. Where did you grow up and what inspired you to join the military?
So I grew up in this little town called Holcomb, Wisconsin. So it is off the grid in the middle of nowhere. So I come from a military family. The town I grew up in is sort of a tourist location. So I had a lot of exposure to people from places like Chicago and Minneapolis, and so it would be airline pilots and people coming in, and a little bit of, in a resort town, you watch customers get liquored up and they fall off their bar stools. So, I would watch my mom, a bartender, almost be their therapist. So that's kind of where I come into maybe wanting to help people and also wanting to travel. So I tried to get hired as an airline attendant, and I never got hired. And you're young, you're in a small town, you're like, what else is there? So I looked to the service, and the Air Force promised me a guaranteed job flying with AWACS. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And it was so intriguing, but honestly, it's all the tech stuff isn't that exciting, to be honest. But that was my entry point into the service.
Nice. So the Air Force just because they offered you the AWACS? Did you look at any other branches, or was it just always Air Force for you?
I did. So I went to different recruiters like the Navy and the Marine Corps, and they kept trying to shuffle me toward these jobs that looked really boring. And I'm just a young kid at this time, and I'm thinking, I want something more.
Yeah.
Like, you got to give me something more. So when I went to the Air Force recruiter, he said AWACS. And I'm like, what is that? And he started explaining it. And I'm like, okay.
Well,
So
that
I
doesn't sound so boring.
no, I got actually a lot more excitement than I asked for.
Yeah. You said you tried to become a flight attendant. How old were you when you tried to do?
Oh, I was probably maybe 20-ish.
I
20.
bet that's why you didn't get hired, because you have to be 21.
Oh,
Yeah, you have to be 21. It's really weird. It's the same for commercial pilots. I didn't know that until I was in flight school. And to fly for the commercial airlines, you have to be 21 years old. And I think it's probably, in the case of a flight attendant, it got something to do with the service of alcohol.
okay.
Just like at a grocery store. I don't know if you've ever been at a grocery store, but you get the young high school clerk that can't check you out because you've got alcohol and they're not 21. It's a really strange rule, but no, that's interesting. So you join the Air Force, you go to the AWACS unit. What was that process like for you? Was it, how was basic training? How was, kind of your indoctrination into the Air Force?
So basic training, I don't think anybody totally prepared me for it. And I get there and it's like, whoa, what did I sign up for? You're kidding.
Yeah.
Like, how can I get out of this? But of course you're there and you get through it and you grow and you realize that you're on the right path. And it built my confidence probably 100%. All the things that I learned and the teamwork and the attention to detail and um, and going beyond that, it was all the training I had to do to fly with AWACS. So going through SERI, so survival school in Washington State, I weighed maybe 110 pounds. If I was lucky, 5'6". I was almost underweight. I'm I'm out there with a group of people that are men mostly that are way bigger than I am. And I'm struggling under the weight of a 70-pound pack. But what makes it all work is teamwork. So I learned a lot about teamwork, and everybody has a weakness and a strength, something they bring to the team. But I also learned that maybe part of it's ego, but it was so hard. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. But what I learned is I'm not going to go home and tell people I failed. So maybe that's a little bit ego, but I made it work. And I learned that if you put your mind to it, no matter how hard it is, you can make it work.
I've heard that about SEER school before. I never had the opportunity to go through the full SEER school. I got introduced to a short, like 3-day program, but everybody I've ever talked to that's gone through SEER school says it's probably the most valuable school they ever went to in their entire military career. From just the skills that you learn, what you learn about yourself, what you learn about others, how it's called survival, evasion, resistance, escape for a reason, but learning how to survive and just all the kind of cool stuff. Did you feel that way about the course?
Absolutely. And there was so many things being a young person I couldn't have anticipated, like prisoner of war camp and the things they do to you in the camp and the stress positions they put you in, strip searching you, just all of the crazy things. But it builds you to be stronger. And in the face of adversity, I never realized how it would help me through my later career issues and struggles I went through, but that's what I always went back to. Anytime I ever had a struggle in my career or life, I'd always fall back on the SERI training.
Yeah, so it's definitely a lesson in really building resilience, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you get done with all of that. What was your first unit? Where did you go? How was that?
So my first unit was the 965th AWACS in Oklahoma City, near Oklahoma City. And, you live out of a deployment bag. You're on alert. You're on call all the time. It's not a 9-to-5 job. So I stayed for the first 4 years, and that's why I retrained out, because you're gone all the time. And there's the factor of instability there. But it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. A little girl from Holcomb, Wisconsin, going to Saudi Arabia, going shopping in downtown Riyadh in the gold souks. And that was my first deployment there. The second deployment, we weren't allowed to go off base without a bulletproof vest. And just tensions had heightened, the threats had heightened, but it was just being immersed in a completely foreign culture. And what was so intriguing was the women. I mean, we have all these things we take for granted as women in this country, but if most women were to set foot in some of our foreign countries, they might shift their perspective and realize it's not as bad as you think it is.
I'm not allowed to comment on that, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
I probably wouldn't. I don't get offended too easily.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of my life in third world shitholes, and when I hear women here bitching about how bad they have it, it's like, you really have zero perspective on what's actually going on in other parts of the world. And I digress. That's not what we're here to talk about. For those that are listening who don't understand what AWACS is, what is the primary mission of the AWACS unit? And like, what is your mission? What do you guys do?
So it depends on the theater of operations. So if you are, say, in South America, it would be counter drug operations. So we would fly into Panama and do counter drug operations in South America.
Okay.
And if you are, say, deployed to the Middle East, depending on what the theater of operations is, where is there a conflict? So when I was in Riyadh, so we were monitoring the 32nd parallel. So that is the dividing line between Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And it's also not just monitoring that 32nd parallel for fighter jets and other things that aren't supposed to come across that line, but you're monitoring for safe transit of, like, say, United Nations flights. And so I was, the early 90s when I was flying with AWACS, I wasn't on the aircrew that did it, but I don't know if you remember back to the Black Hawk shoot down, the helicopters that were shot down.
That's one of my favorite movies and stories ever. I actually got to meet Michael Durant when I was a younger teenager, but I was only six or seven when that happened. So my military days were far in front of me, but after the Black Hawk Down thing.
Yeah, and one thing I learned, because we went through extensive aircrew retraining because of it, it's so easy to miss a detail. And if you miss a detail, it can cause a catastrophic loss of life, which is what happened. And there were multiple failures, but you look at all of the media and lawyers involved, and it's a hot mess.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I learned early in my career was life is very fragile.
It's true. It's
we have to care about what we're doing, and we have to care about other people.
Yeah, for sure. So you did the AWACS thing for 4 years, right? And then you said you went and retrained because the lifestyle of, being on an AWACS crew was not, I mean, it's cool, but I can imagine 4 years of constant, I had a couple of times in my career where we were on an hour-long recall, bags packed, have to show up, Article 15s if you are late, this, that, and the other. Doing that for even just 6 months, it's miserable. It sucks. You have no personal life. You're largely not doing anything with your free time because you never know. So I imagine that was a big influence on why you wanted to go retrain, huh?
It was, and I wanted more stability in my life, but it's hard to get out of AWACS, well, when I was in it, because they put a lot of money into training you compared to a lot of other positions. So I got lucky. I didn't get my first choice. I got my last choice on the retraining list, which was education and training management.
Nice.
But I ended up loving it.
Is AWACS considered special operations in the Air Force? Or is it kind of like in no man's land in between kind of your because you're saying they're investing a lot of money into you, which is why they don't want to let you go. Sounds like a special operations unit.
It's sort of somewhere in the gray, sort of in the middle. You're not like a special operations stuff, like not like a Navy SEAL But you're a supporter of it. You're somewhere in the special operations, but you're not really special operations.
Yeah. It's. I like the way you put that. It's in that gray area. So, what was the moment that you knew that joining the Air Force had been the right path for you? Was that in basic training? Was that when you got to your AWACS unit? Was that when you decided to retrain? What was the big indicator? I made the right choice. I'm going to make this a career.
I would say survival school. Um, and even though it was the hardest thing, and I'm like, what did I agree to? Like, like this disbelief. But because I got so much out of it, um, it told me that I want to stay in the Air Force. And I realized that, being on air crew, I don't want this lifestyle for the next 20 plus years. And that was a driver in retraining. I wanted to stay in.
Yeah. So you switched to education, and what did that look like for you? What was that path kind of like?
So I learned a lot about the other side, because you have the operational side and you have the more administrative side, the support side. So my first position was in base training management. And so you are basically overseeing all of the units on the base and making sure that all of the education and training managers know how to implement a program, train the trainer, and documenting the training records, because that's actually a really critical thing to do. And just coming from an operational perspective and then going to the support perspective, if you think about if a wrong part is installed or if it's maybe not the right, it's like, say, some kind of a nut, but it's not the right one. And I know that's not the right terminology, but it's not quite the right one. And later you have an equipment malfunction and maybe the plane crashes. One of the first places NTSB is going to look is training records. And is there a failure? Where they're gonna tear every single thing apart. So I've learned the critical side of documentation as well. And people hate it when you come in and to inspect their business and their unit, but you want to have what you're doing inspected before the official inspectors come. You want to know if there's a flaw in what you've created, so you have an opportunity to fix it and correct it.
Yeah, I believe the pilots probably should be the last ones that should be pissed off about you coming to inspect, because I know the NTSB is going to find fault on the pilot about 100% of the time when something goes wrong. And so I know as a pilot, I would want you to come and make sure training is happening the right way. Particularly, like, my experience with flying is I pre-flight the airplane. I'm checking all of this stuff. Of course, I don't do the maintenance on it, but like I am putting eyes on it. And I know, as you're flying jets and bigger airplanes, like there's a whole crew that does that for you. You just kind of show up to the plane, do a few checks, and then you trust, the rest of your team that they're trained to the ability and the standard. So I would have welcomed you in my shop as a pilot, I think, because it's super important. Because like you said, if one nut is not wire tied with the correct number of spins on that wire, according to the FAA or whatever the Air Force rules are, and that airplane crashes, they'll find a way to blame it on the pilot.
Right. There's always a scapegoat. And I look back to the whole Black Hawk helicopter shoot down incident, and there was a scapegoat in that. And I don't even remember all of the end results, but there was a lot of legal issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Looking, nobody wants to say it's my problem or I caused it, right?
Yeah. So you switched to education at some point. So you came in the Air Force on active duty, and then you switched over to the Guard, correct? When did you make that transition?
I was somewhere between 9 and 10 years in active duty.
And what led to you wanting to leave active duty and go to the Guard?
So I was getting married, and I was given the only option I had was a remote assignment to South Korea. And you don't want to get married and leave your new spouse behind.
Yeah, so that was a hardship to her still back then, because I know when I joined the Army in 2003, as an infantry guy, I was guaranteed you were going to go to Korea at some point during your career. Now, that all changed with GWAT and being deployed every other year, but at some point, they would still funnel guys to Korea, except they were now no longer a hardship tour. You could opt to do 2 years and take your family with you. So was it still a hardship tour back then?
And I don't recall specifically what it was. I just remembered I was geared more toward getting out, family life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So how was the transition from active duty to the guard? What if any struggles did you face in kind of leaving behind, the military 9 to 5, and now, yeah, you're a weekend warrior, 1 month a year kind of deal, but also you have to go get a real job at this point, right? Like,
So what I did is I was an I forgot what the proper terminology is, a technician. So a federal civil service technician. So I was still military, but I was also civil service. So I was basically full time. I would just get paid in different statuses.
right. That's nice. So did you walk right into that before you got out? So you had that set up before you made the transition from active to guard?
Sort of on the way out the door, I had part of it set up, and then I walked into the full-time component of it. But part of the transition from active duty to guard was you have a different mentality, a different culture, and there wasn't a good grip on helping people from different services, right, integrate and helping make it work. So there was always an attitude of the guard against people coming from active duty. And so it was kind of strange.
I've heard that. I heard that from a lot of the infantry guys I served with would get out and they would go to the guard and they'd be like, I can't do this. The mentality is so much, particularly, I don't know, an infantry unit in the Army and even the Marine Corps, it's like its own branch within a branch. So there's just mindset and stuff is different. And they go to the guard and they would just be like, it's really just fucked up. They're so fucked up. They don't train. They don't have. And I was like, that sucks, dude. I tried to tell you not to get out. Like, you were insistent on going to the guard. So you're not the first person that's told me that. I think that's awesome. So now you're in the Air National Guard. You're a technician for the federal government, basically active reserve component kind of thing. I know my sister and brother-in-law, they have some worked out deal with the Air Force where they, during the summer, work for like 3 months and then they don't have to do their drill or their 1 month a year kind of thing. It's really cool. And they get paid active duty pay while they're doing it. I'm familiar with what you're talking about. So you would do that for the next 14 years, right?
Yep. And one of the things he mentioned and that I struggled with, and especially coming from an operational background where it's so easy for a tiny mistake to turn into the loss of life. And you have different mentalities in the guard, and being in a leadership role, it would leave me completely on edge.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Stressful. I get it. So the time comes for you to walk away from everything Air Force, the guard, it's over. What led you to the decision to retire at 24 years, first of all?
I had some pretty significant medical issues, so I had to medically retire. So I couldn't promote. I was dealing with severe chronic fatigue syndrome. And at that time, it wasn't really known everything that was going on with me, but I would go through periods of brain fog, complete exhaustion. And I was in a toxic environment, burnout, and I didn't even know what burnout was, but I would go to the flight surgeons and I don't think they got women's health care. And it would be like they think they have, and there's a lot of literature on this. So, and you're also going through a hormone change. So working mid-shift can mess up your hormones. And that was part of my issue. They see a woman with hysteria, not a woman who is a career professional who something is very wrong. Something is very off. And if your hormones are off and unbalanced, anxiety and depression are completely normal.
So there was no, you would go to the flight surgeons and there was no actual, let's take some blood, let's check hormone levels. There was no like foresight to do any of that. They just thought essentially you were crazy.
So, well, sort of, but I think there was some of that. But I was also in a traumatic environment, so you have a blend of stuff going on. But they also didn't get women's hormones. And so you can't give certain drugs if you have someone with a hormone imbalance. It's going to drive it further and further out of control. And that was part of the whole issue. And they've never admitted it. And that's fine because I figured it out.
Okay, so I mean, I think this is important to talk about because this is a big part of why I wanted to have you on the show, to call attention to all of the challenges that you face, particularly transitioning out and dealing with. I assume the toxic environment you're talking about is the work environment at the GS level that you were working at. And I can probably picture it now. It's probably a bunch of old white guys who are just fucking assholes to everybody who's not in the boys club, right? Is that pretty accurate?
And they're not all white boys, but yeah. So you have the boys club, and you have being on the West Coast, and well, the whole military is transitory, but you have people from different cultures that have different views of women. And so a huge part of my issue was you're co-leading or leading a mission, and things could go catastrophically wrong. You have the boys club where certain people don't have to take orders from a woman. And you are in the hot seat. Like, what do you do? And if you file a complaint, which I did, well, that's the problem. And you're going to be marked. And that was the whole beginning of my end. So one of my traits is core values. It's just having integrity, what you do, and service over self. And when you're on that operations floor, you can't bring your personal problems and your baggage onto that floor and your perceptions. You have to leave it. You have to check it out at the door before you enter.
You know, I thought that was understood at the military level, at least in the units that I was a part of. And I totally get it. I kind of sheltered in the military life because the infantry was all male units. We would work with women overseas, but they largely had their own teams separate from us, you know, and we were just like, never, like, even the lowest private, particularly on deployment, if you have a good idea, I want to hear it because people's lives matter here. And so I just thought that was something that was understood. Like, if you're on the command center floor to execute a mission, it doesn't matter. We're all wearing the same damn uniform, right? Like, we're all the same color. We're all the same gender. We're all wearing the same damn uniform. We're here to do a job. Let's do the job, not point fingers and not take responsibility. And I don't know. I think that shit's out of control and it needs to stop. I think there's a big problem with that at all levels in all branches of the military right now.
And everything I went through, it wasn't just, so losing professional identity. So that's 55% of identity. So identity is a social construct, but 55% of how Americans identify are with the work that they do. So when you go through a transition, you lose a job, you're medically retired, and you're not working, and people ask you, what do you do? And
you don't have an answer because you don't know. Yeah.
And you feel this blank void because, and it's not that you don't want to work, it's that you can't. And then, so it's losing the 55% plus your gender identity is a much smaller percentage, but trying to figure out, like, you're in this male-dominated world, and it's okay, and some are awesome, right? But the last one I was in was so toxic, and you lose who you are as a woman. And so I was just confused about everything because I had grown up in the world of women's rights and all this stuff, and the roles shifted from, the value of being a mom to working. And it was suddenly okay not to take a day off or rest. And so one of the things I wanted to become most in life was a mother. So I failed to become a mother because I failed to pivot. And then I retire and I get back home and I feel kind of shamed because I failed to become a mother. And I'm like, like I'm frustrated because I can't win. Like,
Right. So it was do the professional thing, not take a day off and work as hard as you can, sacrifice being a mom, and then you get out. Now you're being hit from the other side. Well, you're X years old. Why don't you have kids? That kind of thing.
and they think you're just some selfish person, and you're not. And I hate this concept of people saying, as a woman, women's rights, you can have it all, and you can't. You something has to give.
I'm so glad
And,
you said that because that's true for every human being on the planet. Men, women, it doesn't matter. You can't have it all. You have to sacrifice certain things in order to get to where you want to go.
and
What
and
what you sacrifice is up to you.
and there's this perception of equality. It has to be an eye for an eye. And okay, so I get it with like the pay gap, but when it comes to certain things like, say, military roles for women, you have to look at what is the military. So I'm going to probably get hit for this, but I don't know that I think women should be in all roles because, okay, and let's take away the eye for an eye equality perspective and look at it as more of a, from yin and yang, however you say it. So let's look at it for that as more of a complementary perspective. So men and women complement each other. We both have equal energies or identities in our bodies. So I don't think everything in this world has to be an eye for an eye. I think if we look at it more for how do we support each other, because when I look at a woman and maybe in certain roles on a battlefield, that could be really hard. And I'd have to get more perspectives from people. But I mean, I flew with AWACS, so that was pretty accommodating for women. But when you're out on a battlefield, like say in a tank, I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to be a woman veteran. I actually wouldn't want that role.
Well, and it's funny that you're bringing this up, and it's going to eliminate any hate that you're going to get because the Marine Corps just released a study recently on the combat effectiveness, the combat effectiveness of combat units like infantry units with women in them and all male units, and it's not even close. The all male units outperform all of the integrated units right now. It's disturbing because standards changed. Different. I haven't read the actual study yet. I'm trying to find it online to read it, but the Marine Corps actually did a study on this, and it's almost detrimental to the fighting force to integrate in the name of equality, because I think like to your point, there are some badass women out there who can do that, but they're like this small percentage of the population that can do that. I mean, think about it from your perspective. You said when you went to SEER school, you were 110 pounds. I weighed 215 pounds. You put a vest and a combat load on me. I now weigh close to 300 pounds. If something happens to me and we're in a firefight and you need to move me to cover or safety, can you drag me? Can you pick me up and put me over your shoulder?
Absolutely not.
You know what I mean? And it's like,
not even with all the willpower in the world could I pick you up and carry you.
And so it's just interesting that because now a lot of women are coming out about this, right? Like I think the military, they did the thing where we need to integrate everybody into everything and in the name of equality. And it's like, how about we stop thinking about equality, that way, and let's put the best people for the job, no matter race, creed, color, gender, it doesn't matter. Like the best qualified people for that job is what we should be looking at. Who can execute on this job? Like leave the other bullshit out of it, right?
Right. And we can try to strive for, when you think about basic training, it remakes you. I'm trying to I can't think of the word I want to find, but you're
indoctrinated.
Yeah,
I mean, it's exactly what they're doing is, and I talk about this a lot, right? Like the difference between being in the military and why we struggle with identity when we get out is the military is a very fixed mindset. And in order to figure out who you are as a person, you need to adopt a growth mindset. Fixed mindset works great for the military. One job, one mission for one branch, never changes. Be the best in that track as you can, right? Like it's very fixed mindset. And so, moving to the growth mindset where you have to now explore all these other perspectives, like that's challenging, but it's helpful,
Yeah. And I hope you read my book on identity, because I lost my identity. And so there's a lot more to that story, but it was a question of I couldn't get the services I needed. And how do I rebuild my life with no
Well, let's
service?
let's talk about that. So part of your biggest challenge in the transition, you've alluded to it, is clearly it's the same problem that I think we all face. Is two main things: loss of identity, and with that comes loss of purpose, right? And we are purpose-driven creatures. We have to have a purpose. Every single person has some kind of purpose on this planet, and so let's talk about your loss of identity and what contributed to that and the challenges you faced in that, because that's the important part. This is, you're not the only one. I refuse to believe that you're the only one that's experienced this. I just believe you're the first person to come forward and willing to share your experience with this. And it's why I created this show, because I know when I was sitting around in that dark place trying to figure out what was going on, if I could have come across a show like this, somebody talking to veterans, finding out what their career looked like a little bit, and then how hard the transition and the challenges they faced in that, and then what they're doing on the other side of that to become successful, I would have been so much better off. And so I think it's important to tell these stories. And I would love to hear how you unpacked all of this, because I know somebody else out there can benefit from it.
So, we all fear judgment, but I gave up caring because I was judged the day I was born. I'm going to be judged from what I say today. I will be judged to the day I die. And I had to let go of caring. But so to begin with identity loss. So when you are in a toxic relationship, a toxic environment, so part of my downfall with burnout came from being in the Guard. Somebody I supervised who couldn't take direction from women became my supervisor when they became an officer. And so when you talk about the dark triad of identity traits, you're dealing with narcissism, sociopathy. I can't say it right, so let's forget it. But there's three of them, and it's Machiavellian behavior. And so that's sort of what happened. And this supervisor became everything I was and erased who I was. So my professional accomplishments were erased. And there was so much abuse that I began just checking out. And so some people deal with trauma in different ways. Some people are going to punch you. Some people are going to run away. And we don't choose. Our brain makes that decision. But I began just checking out. And so that's huge identity loss. And there's probably a name like you dissociate, but do we really need names at this point? So if you didn't fight hard enough, guess who's the problem? Yeah. So, and even though everything was proven in the end, coming through the medical system was just a nightmare, feeling re-abused, because if your provider doesn't get it, and you can tell her, but she doesn't want to believe you because there's a perception of what a hero is also, and that's part of the impact to my medical care. And I reached this point of being so beat down that I walked away from medical care. And so I still really don't actually have the right medical care, but one of the things I learned to do is figure out how to get myself back. How do I ground myself? How do I stay present? How do I keep from checking out? So I have a little bit of a background in social work and psychology. That was a former major that I was in. But that combined with theory training, combined with knowing how to research, always having to find an answer, I began solving my own issues. And then it became a question of, how do I help other people? And how do I help other people forward? Because I'm not the only one who struggled with this. And it's so hard to transition. And every interaction I'd have with most of medical care, most of the veteran leadership would be, instead of empowering you, so occupational wellness, Adam, is defined as doing work that is aligned with who you are. So if you're stripped of your professional identity, don't you think it would be critical to have someone help you rebuild your life and not just pull out a minimum wage job list and tell you that that is all you're worth? And so I think in 2015, I was told I was worth, don't fall off your chair, I'm about ready to, $7.25 an hour, minimum wage in Wisconsin. And and they couldn't translate my skill set. They would tell me that my leadership had no value, and I didn't know how to translate it.
Who is they? Who is they that would tell you that your leadership had no value?
Vocational rehabilitation and nonprofits.
A Veterans Affairs program told you that your leadership had no value. You're fucking E7.
Yeah,
How does it have no value? I don't understand that.
And a GS-11 is an officer role, technically.
Yeah, so you have literally loads of proof that your leadership is clearly. You don't make E7. I'm sorry. Like, yes, I do understand across the military the wrong people make E7, but it's so few and far between. Like, you really have to do something to stand out, to prove that you're a good leader in your career to get E7. It's I just don't understand somebody a Veterans Affairs program telling you that your leadership was basically worthless. That's mind blowing to me.
Yeah, they didn't understand it, and part of it's systemically driven. Part of it's driven by relational aggression against the woman veteran, and I couldn't deal with it anymore because what was happening was I wasn't being served in the right way. I knew what I needed. I was stepping forward and telling people this is what I need, and it wasn't allowed. And part of it is they have a short amount of time and they're trained to give you the list and not support you in your occupational wellness.
Well, and I relate to that because I have my own issues with voc rehab, particularly when I was in flight school. You know, the GI Bill will only cover private through commercial. There's a bunch of other stuff that you're supposed to be allowed to use voc rehab for. And I have 5 or 6 pilot buddies who are now flying at the airlines who got voc rehab to pay for things like multi-engine and CFI to get them on the career track. And when I show up for voc rehab to do the same thing, my voc rehab counselor immediately was like, well, that's not an option. Here's the list of things that are your option. And I was like, no. Like I'm in school with a guy who's in my flight training class right now, whose counselor's name is this. He got it approved. You can get it approved for me. So I saw, what you're talking about in the wrong people doing the job, not supporting the veteran. That's exactly what it comes down to is the wrong people hold these jobs. They gatekeep this stuff. They're fucking lazy and they don't want to do what they're supposed to do. And again, like you said, they encourage them to kind of move you through the pipeline as fast as possible, which doesn't leave any time for them to go do their homework to get you what you actually want for your occupational wellness.
Exactly.
I definitely have feelings about this because, flight school is not cheap, particularly multi and CFI. That's like another $40,000 or $50,000 that you've got to invest. And it would have been nice if the benefits that I earned would have paid for that.
And it kills me because then they'll say, we don't know why there's 22 a day. We don't know why this person is depressed, why they feel they have no purpose, why they don't want to get up out of bed. But part of the issue is I'm a Gulf War veteran. Part of the medical retirement was for chronic fatigue syndrome. So I would be bullied. And 2020 was the last time. It actually wasn't the last time, but it was when I had a severe meltdown because I got bullied, massively bullied. And it was the doctor yawning, when I was trying to get a career accommodation. And so they didn't believe me, but it's in my chart. Like, I'm proven. So I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I think I remember going online, and I don't remember even what I said. I don't even want to go back and read it. It was pretty rough. But it wasn't just being bullied by medical providers. I had volunteered for a nonprofit who wanted to take over what I was creating. And so it's led to this where you're trying to protect yourself, but it's women specifically not supporting other women. So it's women disempowering other women. So one of the issues was a nonprofit leader who failed to develop a program for women vets that I just had happened to walk in the door to volunteer, and I wanted help trying to create a program. So the next thing I know, I was fired from my volunteer role, and she had set herself up. So I was on their board of directors to take over what I was creating. And I had been so smeared. I had been bullied online because of her and a social worker. And it drove me into I was in this severe funk and this depression. And I had this deep understanding of 22 a day. And I felt like, just, is everything a joke? Like, you have all these people, oh, I support 22 a day and underemployment and unemployment. But it's a lie for so many of them. There's good people out there,
Oh
but
yeah.
you have to filter through all of this stuff. And even present time, I'm dealing with that. I have a nonprofit. So I started my company in 2022, and it has to deal with identity coaching. So I don't
Yeah,
coach.
we're gonna get there.
Okay.
Because I do have another question. So through all of this stuff that you described, right? The bullying, the women not supporting other women, the stealing of ideas and implementing of your ideas and firing you so that they can make that happen. How do you stay resilient through all of that? How do you? Because look, I mean, it's not a secret. We've already, I've talked about it numerous times on this show. There was a point in my life where whether I had the balls to actually kill myself or not remains to be seen. But plenty of times I'd be on the Harley riding 100 miles an hour and like, man, if I just hit that tree at 120, it's all over. And I don't have to wake up feeling like this anymore. So how do you stay resilient in all of that? How do you claw your way back to the top? For me, it was very discouraging looking for other holistic resources that weren't the VA, that weren't the traditional routes, then finding, there's a lot of veteran charities out there that, and I'm talking specifically about plant medicine, that, help people get plant medicine journeys and retreats and all of this, but they cater to special operations forces. That was not me. I was just a conventional guy. That's discouraging, right? Like, and then finally I get picked up by Heroic Hearts Project, changed my life, greatest thing ever, whatever. There were times where I was like, yeah, I'm just going to not do this anymore. I just don't, like, there's no point, like I'm getting nowhere. Like, how did you stay resilient and not do something that so many of our brothers and sisters do?
It's hard. It's hard, especially when you're getting beat down. I've gone through falling to the bottom multiple times and being beat down even when you're at the bottom because somebody can maybe benefit or gain. I haven't always been resilient, but I've managed to bounce back from being resilient, falling, being resilient. But like you, Adam, I mean, I used to think about, if you just lay down on the beach, the Pacific water is extremely cold, wait for high tide. It doesn't take long. Cold water, you're going to pass out. But it's not that you even want to do that. It's just that you're driven to this point because
Yeah,
nobody supports you.
because it's the only thing in your mind that you can see that's going to work, right? Like, you've
You're,
tried
you're
literally almost everything else that you can think of, and you're meeting resistance along the way, sometimes mostly regressing, not making any progress. And so, yeah, I relate to that 100%. And so at some point you decide enough's enough. Let me become an entrepreneur and control all of this for myself. So how did you arrive at the decision to start your identity coaching practice, and what set that spark off, that entrepreneurial spark for you?
So it was not getting hired in a role that I needed. And so I was trying to get picked up at a career coach with different platforms, and I wasn't getting hired so I could work from home to create an accommodation. So I said, I'm going to create my own business. So I had a coach I worked with. She's also a doctor. Awesome lady. She probably knows who she is if she's out there listening. So I kept telling her what my plans were, and she's like, nope, nope. And I'm like,
Nope.
she's like, no. And she's like, dream bigger. She's like, create your own business. And I began dreaming bigger, and I had this huge vision. And I didn't have the resources to create everything I was going to create. And I thought back to a poem I had written in English class like some decades ago. And it was about Elysian. Elysian in Greek mythology is a blissful, peaceful paradise where warriors go. They go on a hero's journey to find peace. So to figure out really, so what I pulled into that is, who are you? To just come in with who you are. So, and also in Greek mythology is a river Lethe. So it's where you basically lose your identity. So I just began pulling all these concepts together. And So I don't work on the medical side of identity loss, but I did a lot of research. So what is identity? Where does it come from? And while it's a social construct, 55% is your professional identity. And I'm like, no wonder I feel lost. And you get bullied if you're not working. And I've dealt with so much bullying over the years. And so I wanted to create something where, and I'm not even a typical career coach. I'm not just a black and white resume, but I call it a wellness sanctuary, because being in alignment with your profession. So doing work that is aligned with who you are.
Yes.
So what is your identity? And I did this research and realized a lot of people don't know who they are. And some people just haven't had the right tools and resources for development, but you have a darker side that isn't stable in their core. So those are the people who steal your identity, who you'll constantly see them pivoting to new things all the time. But in dealing with developing people, so 99% of college kids choose the wrong path, and they're still young, right? And until you try things, you don't always know what's right for you. But they go on to be the 40-something% of mid-career professionals who have major regrets because they chose the wrong job or the wrong degree. And
I'm
now
glad you're pointing this out about college, because when I went to college at 30 years old, when I got out of the Army, I realized I don't think college was really created for people straight out of high school to go to. I really think college was created for people who have a little bit of life experience and kind of know what path they're on. It was really interesting, because I knew graduating high school, like, college, not an option for me. I'm going to go there, probably not going to make it past the first semester because I'm going to get into drugs and drinking, and just school was not something that I wanted to do. Fast forward, 13, almost 14 years later, and I'm like, well, college is really easy because I have discipline, I have time management skills, I know what interests me as a person, I can visualize myself doing this as a career kind of thing. Like, it was completely different than when I was 17 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, and so sometimes you don't know, and then this poor kid is stuck with a whole load of debt. And so they go on to become a mid-career professional who is 40-something%, and they wish they chose a different degree, but there's a problem. They're in deep financial debt. They have student loan debt. They probably have a mortgage, and they have a family in tow, and they're more stuck than ever. They hate their life. They hate their job. They're probably the miserable coworker making your life miserable at work. And there's 89% burnout. While some of it's driven from the design of a work center, sometimes it's driven by people themselves, and they don't know how to pivot. So one thing I learned about, and this was after I retired, so I had the honor of working in a mental health clinic, not as a doctor, I can't do that obviously, but so I was treating patients with RTMS. It's electromagnetic therapy for depression and anxiety. So basically charting patient records and learning about the technology, because those were two skills that I had. So that's kind of how I got hired. But I would notice all these people that were depressed, they didn't want to live anymore, and they didn't know how to pivot. So then I got into the world of design after I left the clinic and realized, oh, wow, this could open up a world of opportunity for a lot of people, not just veterans. And so if they can learn how to pivot when they're really stuck, because I was stuck, and that was part of how, I failed to pivot. I could have pivoted, but I didn't. But how do you get out of what you're in? How do you make
How do you pivot? That's where we're going with this. How do you pivot?
And you need all these drugs when there's other solutions to your life problem in it. And if you're in debt, it's probably not going to be an overnight solution. But if you can lay a roadmap out for somebody and they still have a dream to chase, that makes life worth living and worth getting up for every day. And so I realized too, I went through a little bit of a midlife crisis, and it was partly because of going through identity stripping as a woman, failing to become a mother, going through a divorce, and you're just so it's rebuilding your life. But so I did a lot of research, and it's in the back of my book if people want to look it up and do a little more research. And the book I originally was writing, it was so boring. It was like a technical manual you write for operations. And I realized I don't want to read my own book. So I had to, and I And I said, well, Georgia, you want to get into creative writing. Let's rethink this. So it's not a book that will solve every problem. Life coaching books typically don't, but it's a guide to entice you to ask a few more questions. And the research is at the end if somebody really wants to know more.
That's awesome.
But this is tools because, one of the things I didn't have as coming out of high school into college was tools to make informed decisions. And how do you make realistic changes to live a sustainable life? So that's what I've created.
I love it. Let's talk about the U University. I'm really interested in this idea. How did you come up with the idea for the U University, and how does it work, and what could people expect if they go through that program with you?
So the U University,
Yeah, U
capital
University.
U, it's all about, so some of it's just self-development. And so if people don't want to do one-to-one coaching, or maybe my schedule is full, or they're not sure, they can start with something smaller. So they're just short micro courses, and I'm still trying to get it. I'm dealing with a Wix platform, so trying to get it connected online is another story. But so I've developed several courses that people can go through to just develop who they are.
What do those courses look like? Can you give us an example of some of the things or tools that they'll learn in there in order to discover who they are as a person?
So one of them is about authenticity. So authenticity is being who you are, and it's about being present in who you are. And if a lot of people, I've just all the research I did, they're not really being who they are. They have a mask on, and it could be for a multitude of reasons. It could be because of the way they were programmed. It could be because of a fear of some kind, because they're in a social situation. But real presence is being who you are. And that leads me to insecurity. I meet so many, specifically women, that are highly insecure. And when I first pivoted into the business world, that's what I saw, and it actually scared me. And I think it's intimidating when you're secure in your person. But when people don't have inner security, they're going to be constantly pivoting to new things and putting on a mask of high confidence and look at me. And they're like your social media. They're always on social media. But to really be who you are in your authenticity means you have to dive deep into whatever those insecurities are. Who are you really? And if you're an insecure person, you're not being authentic. And that leads me to the whole craziness I've dealt with in the business world, specifically with coaches. So I have tools for coaches because I see them constantly pivoting from thing to thing to thing. And for me as a coach, I don't want to coach if I can't coach what's true and authentic to me. But I would notice all the coaches around me trying to do exactly what I was doing. And having gone through identity stripping and watching this, I don't know, I want to call it craziness, but insecurity, it just drove me nuts, and it put me on the defensive. And it's like, why don't you try to be yourself? And some people, they don't want to do the work. They're lazy. Some people can't self-reflect, but it's trying to reach people who want to find what is authentic to them in the coaching marketplace.
I love that, particularly as somebody who tries to be as authentic as possible. I get what you're saying about insecure people. It just leeches off of them, and I can tell going into a meeting if you're insecure, or if you're not sure of who you are, if you're trying to. I see right through it now. It's really weird. I didn't before, obviously, right? Like a lot of things reveal themselves after you start doing this work on yourself. After you sit with yourself and discover who you are, what your core beliefs and values are, what your passions are, and then you start pursuing a life in pursuit of those, things really change. Your ability to see through the bullshit really changes. It's really cool.
And success comes from authenticity. So if you have someone out there coaching something and they're not authentic in who they are, and they're going to try to coach you into your authenticity, and they're not authentic, but at some point the mask is going to slip and fall off because they're going to start chasing something else. And let's talk about the energy loss and being inauthentic. So you have an internal dialogue. So you have a narrative and a story that is not authentically yours, and you're trying to project it, but you have a different story that's real. So you have a conflict, and that conflict, so whatever's going on in your internal world is going to reflect externally. And so they can only keep up the masquerade for so long.
Yeah,
So, but
man.
there's tools to combat insecurity. So I did some research into insecurity because I've never really been insecure. So it was perplexing to me, people who are. And it actually scared me. So this one, this one coach in particular, I had connected with her, and she started like loading up everything that was unique about me on her website. And it was so creepy to me. So I kicked her out, and maybe that wasn't the right solution, but I was kind of triggered by it. And then I later reached out and I got this horrible, it was nasty. It was a cease and desist legal order, and it was actually fake. And it said that I'm trying not to fall off my chair because I know this is going to catch up with her because she's not authentic. Okay, I'm trying not to laugh, Adam.
Oh, I think you should laugh. In fact, I think that, I try to be so authentic that I'm not afraid to put people's names out there that aren't be authentic. I think that that's, you put out, whatever you put out is going to come back to you tenfold. So if you're going to be inauthentic and try and rip people off and pull the wool over people's eyes, I think that it's fair game that the universe would put a show like mine and an interview or a conversation like this out there and let you get put on blast, because people need to be, it's like my whole shtick with the strategic veteran, like inside of the community, you're a part of it. You've noticed there's some different resources in there that, there's a franchise opportunity in there from a husband and wife team who I've had numerous conversations with who genuinely want to help veterans, right? So I go and vet things and opportunities, because my whole thing is I want to be the guy I didn't have when I transitioned. And that means, vetting resources and opportunities and courses or whatever that looks like, so that you don't have to spend the thousands of dollars and get taken like I did, right? To be thrown into somebody's funnel at the top. They're promising you these secrets to unlock these things that you're trying to do in alignment with whatever success looks like to you, only to get in there and find out that it's all bullshit, and you're going to have to pay more money for them to lie to you to say that they're not, you need to pay X number more dollars to get the secret, when in reality, there's no fucking secret. The secret is show up every day, 1% better every day, hard work, talk to people, be a genuine human, and you will make so much progress, your head will spin.
Right. So when I kicked out this coach, it wasn't necessarily the right decision. It was just one of those trigger moment things. And it's like, somebody catches you the wrong way. And then I later reached out and said, look, let's connect and talk about this. And then I get this cease and desist order that threatens me with arrest if I network my business. And so I've been bullied online, in person, for like probably close to a year, 10, 11 months. And it's actually, what's even worse is the people who support the insecure person, because they're not doing the person a favor. And while I'm in a little bit of my own burnout, and I help people with burnout and pointing them towards resources and everything, I have to admit, as a coach, I'm in my own burnout from being bullied. And imagine someone bullying you because they want to use your story. But this is what an insecure person does.
I think you should turn it around on them. I think that you should put them on blast. I think that solves your burnout problem, because now you don't have to deal with the bullying. You clearly see right through what this person's trying to do, steal your ideas and implement them. And I agree with you. It's sad that their followers or their audience will support them in their own robbing of someone else's identity. And it's indicative of the type of audience they've built. It's probably a bunch of other insecure people who are going out and doing the same thing. Oh, I can get ahead in life like this, until you run into somebody like me, and I'll put you on fucking blast. I don't give a shit. Well, I'm already not making any money, so how much worse can it get for me? You're not going to take and affect my ability to enjoy what I do on a daily basis. I think I've interacted with and built an entire network now who knows me as authentically who I am. I think that speaks for itself in the ability for me to bring people on this show, the ability for me to do in-person networking events with people I've never met. The simple fact that I'm doing a networking event this week with a guy who's amazing, Cody Hand. During the hurricane, he offered me the keys to his condo so I could escape in case, the weather was so bad. Like, I'm fairly confident that I could put information out about, if somebody was doing what's being done to you. And I know that my audience would have my back because I've established myself as an authentic person. I learned a long time ago, a little over a year ago, that when you lie to people, you're actually lying to yourself, and it's detrimental to your own mental health.
Exactly.
It's the absolute worst thing that you can do, and you're never going to find success that way. And so when I learned how to love and respect myself and stop lying to myself, particularly lying to myself, everything got better for me.
And you know what I really like about you, Adam, is I can feel it through the screen. I'm also an empath at nature at heart, and I can feel and sense it. So part of my personality profile is a feeler. The rest is top secret.
Yeah. Well, but it's the truth, because I say this, and people talk about this all the time. You need to stop caring what people think about you and giving energy to that. And I, for the longest time, used to think that I didn't care what people think. Well, I was lying to myself because I cared a great deal about what people think. And that comes, full circle all the way back to being a kid, growing up in a broken home, not seeing good examples of what relationships are, and then add to that being bullied because I wear glasses, something I can't do anything about, right? And I'm a product of the mid 80s and early 90s, so it wasn't cool to wear glasses back then like people do now. It's still one of my biggest pet peeves. It's something I try not to give energy to, but when I see people using glasses as a stylistic fashion choice, I'm like, fuck all of you, because you're the ones who made my life a living hell when I was a kid, and now you think it's cool to wear glasses, but it wasn't cool 20 fucking years ago. But in all of that, like, I genuinely don't care what you think of me. I know who I am as a person. I know what my mission is. My mission is to help our brothers and sisters stop taking their own lives and transition better through the tools that I've learned that healed myself. And if I continue to put that out into the universe and stay the course, I know only good things are going to happen for me. So, I would love to know that person's name. I'll make a damn post about it. I'll call them out, because I think that's what it's going to take to rid the world of these people. It's almost, we don't want to teach people lessons, but I think people need to be humbled. I think a great thing, like, the generation that you and I are, I'm largely one of the last people that grew up without electronics in the home in the way of cell phones and computers. I didn't have a computer till I was a junior in high school. Didn't have a cell phone till I was graduated from high school. I think it's a good spot to be in, but also with that comes, you can't talk to people the way that you want to talk to people, because you're going to come across somebody like me who's going to punch you in the damn mouth when you say something off kilter. And, I think there's something to that. Like, people need to learn those lessons. You know what I mean? Like,
your trauma response is to punch and mine's to check out. I mean, we're quite a team.
Well, but I mean, like growing up, like you little toughs here and there. You can't sit behind a keyboard and poke the bear and continue to poke the bear and make fun of people's families and take digs at their spouse or their kids or their wife, because in real life, if you say that to somebody's face, they're going to punch you in the mouth. They're going to let you know that you've crossed the line. And I think we've lost a lot of that in society. And I think that's why we're seeing these problems that you're describing now. I could be completely fucking wrong, but I'm not afraid to sit here and speculate, because I think that's, if you go back to the late 80s, early 90s, you didn't have a lot of the bullshit going on because people would still knock you in the teeth.
Yeah, there was more. We become such a soft culture.
Yeah.
Is that can I see that?
Yeah. That's, I mean, people, we're not politically correct here, so it doesn't matter. It's my damn show. I could do whatever the fuck I want, right? Like, you're right. I do. I think it is a matter of soft. And I think there's a lot of reasons that we don't have time to unpack here, right? Like just the simple fact that electronics exist in everybody's phone. More computing power is at your fingertips in your hand than I ever had growing up right now. Like that's insane to think about. There's more computing technology in your hand than what we had to put a man on the moon in the 60s.
And it isn't about even being insensitive. It's about, think about it, if you're in the middle of a battlefield, they don't have timeout corners.
No, I never got to take a fucking timeout in a firefight ever.
Never,
not once.
Why did I get a timeout in Siri?
Yeah, right, seriously. We could talk about this all day, Georgia. I really appreciate you being here. Please tell everybody how they can find you online if they're interested in your coaching program. And I'll be the first to say, I think that the way that you're going about this, you're the first identity kind of coach that I've met, and I believe 1,000,000% in what you're doing, because in all of these episodes that I've done and all of the hundreds and hundreds of veterans that I've talked to who are transitioning or have transitioned out, the number one problem is that loss of identity that contributes to our overall mental health and state. And I think really the suicide epidemic in general. So it's I'm going to borrow, that statistic. Like I didn't have any idea that 55% of our identity, which is now a social construct, which makes total sense, because part of my shtick, if I'm sure you've heard it, is we don't have to play in the box that society has put us in. We can play outside the box, and I do it every day, and it's so great. My life has so much more meaning. And so, 55% of that coming from what you do as an occupation, no wonder.
Yeah. No wonder we're lost. So we have to rebuild it and reinvent it. And there's other facets of identity too that people can find in my book, but I can be reached at elysiandream.net or georgia.elysiandream@gmail.com.
Awesome. And I know she's over on LinkedIn, so go give her a follow over there. And I know she'll interact with your content. At least she interacts with mine. She's also a member of the Stronghold community. I don't know if you're finding value there. Things are kind of ebb and flow in there, as most of us are business owners. I think there's a lot of social fatigue that's going on right now, particularly with the holidays and all of that. But I try to put as much valuable stuff in there. If there's resources in there that you want to contribute, I'd love for you to recommend other veterans to come join the community so that we can grow together as a community. It's member driven. There's not fluff. There's not bullshit in there. There's just some things to help you have a better time. And I thank you for being here, Georgia. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Georgia Lee Arts, please don't forget to like, share, rate, review, download this episode. Help me achieve my goal of getting this in front of 1 million veterans by the time I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. Lofty goal, but there's 19 million veterans in the United States. So if you would all take 2 seconds to go share this with your network, I know we can accomplish that goal. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week. Take care. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.